already on Facebook. So it was very much an internet-connected culture, and so in many ways it was easier to relate to Tunisians than, for example, when protests started in Yemen. Very few people there are online. The literacy rate is much lower, especially for women. And there was this technique that I had used in other countries where someone would share information, but they didn't source it in any way. They would say, this particular building is on fire. So I would have to reply them and literally just say source ? And it had become habit at that point, and people were used to me doing it, and it kind of became a joke, among my followers on Twitter. And so, like sometimes I would tweet, "We've been waiting for pizza for 45 minutes and it still hasn't arrived," and they write. Suddenly, 50 people would write me back, "Source ? So, it was important, but we didn't take it too seriously. But then protests started happening in Yemen, and I said "source ? To someone who was in Yemen. And they responded to my question. They gave me some information, but then they direct messaged me and asked me for my email address. And they wrote me this rather extended essay on questioning one's honor. And from their perspective, the fact that I said source ? To them it was tantamount to calling them a liar in public. And so when it came to Yemen, I had to use certain words and certain ways of interacting very differently than I had in other countries, just because of that one particular cultural trait. But one thing I did notice is, once a few sources vouch for you, that starts to spread pretty quickly. And so by the time protests were happening in places like Syria, I had people knocking on my door saying, "Hey, we're going to have a revolution," or "Hey, there's going to be a protest, you can talk to us." And then I'd ask my other sources and say, "Do you know this person?" And they'd vouch for them or not vouch for them, and people kind of fell into place. And then things started getting really weird, because then Libyans would be sending me scoops about things happening in the U.S. Like they just saw on TMZ that someone had died, and they just wanted to make sure I knew about it. I mean, it got really, really weird. But that showed how they felt about this. They felt that they knew I was passionate about relaying what was happening, what was true, and what wasn't. And I think they felt a certain amount of civic responsibility to assist me in that process. And I think that's probably the most exciting thing for me here, is I created this really unintentional mass distributed experiment in media literacy, where people went from being very cynical consumers of mass media to people who felt like they could actually contribute to the creation of a story and telling the story in more accurate and culturally respectful ways. And it's a pattern that I've seen repeated again and again and again with new stories happening around the world.
How did they know that you weren't